seconded, and if all those who are commissioners could say aye if they are in favor of that motion. Aye.
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 And do we have any opposing that motion? Going once, twice, thrice, none. So I think we have passed the minutes for you, Jim.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. Can I just ask, just for my, since I'm taking the notes and the minutes here, who is here from, their screen says Shaftesbury Town?
It's Dave Kiernan, Jim.
Thanks, Dave. I thought it probably was, but
I should rename that.
no worries. Well, thank you, everybody. It's yeah, good turnout according to my participants screen here. 27 people on the call at the moment. So I think that's my biggest Zoom call of the week. Congratulations. And I think we have a really good meeting today. You know, an awful lot of interest in economic development in all of our communities, including our village centers. And one of the big issues constraining that, which I'll let other people talk to, certainly is the lack of public infrastructure in some of those places. And I think everybody will find that interesting. And then I hope that everybody had a chance to peruse our newsletter that went out a little while ago, because we have some brief staff reports that will are from the newsletter that'll give people an opportunity to ask questions after our featured presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kat Byers, who is going to introduce the discussion and presentation on small-scale village wastewater solutions. So Kat, over here.
Sure. And while I'm chit-chatting to line this up, Jim, if you can make sure that you've activated the share screen option. I believe our two presenters have some PowerPoints that they're going to be wanting to pull up. So yes, I'm so happy to see the level of interest tonight, people calling in to this meeting. I'm sure for many reasons, but hopefully also specifically for the wonderful presentations we're going to hear tonight from our esteemed guest presenters regarding village wastewater solutions. And this is, of course, a perennial topic for planning and development, not only in our region, but in all of Vermont. But specifically to our region, when we think about the current reality, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have just 3 towns that have sewer systems, Bennington, Manchester, and Pownell. And the rest of our large and well-populated region relies on villages and hamlets that do not have that public infrastructure. And happy to say, being familiar with the development regulations and policies through the last many years, previously the policies and regulations in many cases were a primary barrier to dense smart growth development in our historic centers. It's been really great to see the policies across the region really catch up to the times and integrate smart growth policies. What that's led us though to is the place where it's actually our wastewater and water infrastructure that is providing that primary barrier to development. So we're so happy tonight to have our guests. I will say, just because Jim asked me to introduce this topic, I don't believe that a lot of you are aware, but wastewater and village level wastewater planning is one of my primary entry points to the planning field. My graduate research was into very innovative and very alternative solutions, wastewater solutions for villages involving pea-cycling, for example, on-site recycling of urine as a fertilizer. So that is a conversation for another night, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you guys, give you a nice little peek at that work that I've been involved in. But I'm not.
So everybody can say pea cycling tomorrow. So yeah.
Recycling, spread the word, and maybe we'll have another occasion to talk about that. But tonight I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over, introduce our guests. So I'm gonna reference my notes to make sure I don't get anything wrong. We have Julie Beth JB Hines. She's of Birchline Planning LLC, a private consultant. And I believe you're currently based out of California, but you've worked with communities all across the country in local water sustainability and development issues, and have worked extensively in Vermont, of course. We also have Amy McCrellis of Stone Environmental, where you've been for nearly 2 decades, working primarily in the area of water quality research, community wastewater systems, and green infrastructure design. And I know you've both worked from design to actual development of wastewater scale systems in Vermont. So we're so excited. We have lots of representatives of communities that are actively thinking about this. So hopefully we'll be able to get into some of the nitty-gritty details following your presentations. And with that, I'll hand it over to you. You should be able to activate PowerPoints if you have them.
Great, thank you, Kat. I'm going to start out really quick. Ken, how are we doing on seeing the PowerPoint? So I'm going to try the slideshow, and then we'll probably have to press 6 or 7 other magic buttons to make it all work. Can you all see a single slide now?
No, we have the presenter view.
Okay, stand by. How's that?
Better.
All right. Okay, so as Kat said, I'm Julie Beth Hines, and I'm currently in San Diego. I've not been away from Vermont this long in my entire life, and it's kind of a chafe, but my firm is Birchline Planning, which actually has a real office in Waterbury. And I've worked with Amy for 20 years now on this.
My entire career. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is poor Amy. But we've had a long and colorful history working together, but we're able to report that in the last 5 or 6 years, there are some really interesting new tools that are available and that have now sort of been test driven by other Vermont communities that offer some real potential to get some things done on the wastewater front. So please stop us right now with the displays. I can't see you all, so if you just unmute and holler at me if there are questions. I'm going to start out. Amy will take over after a couple of slides, but we're really here as a resource and to provide some new directions and options that we've found and that we hope can be useful to you. Couple of terms for those, unlike Kat, I didn't have P-cycling on this list, but we'll add it for terms of endearment for wastewater projects. We talk a lot about the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which is the state's main means of funding capital improvements for wastewater and water and stormwater. That's where towns bond to borrow money and then pay that back, usually with user fees from ratepayers. And we talk about community or cluster systems versus individual systems. By that, we just mean a community system is serving 2 or more buildings or households or entities with one treatment system that can be multiple septic tanks going to a common field, but there's some commonality of that infrastructure. Individual systems, by contrast, which we will be talking about, are where all the treatment and dispersal occurs on one property. Community wastewater loan funds. We now have one operating backed by the Clean Water SRF in Waitsfield, where the town has basically passed through money to individual private property owners to upgrade, repair, and replace their on-site systems, both individual and cluster. That is a new thing, could be relevant to some of your communities. So we'll talk about a community fund with a town as the financial intermediary to get that money to get the wastewater infrastructure built. Dispersal or septic fields is the land where we infiltrate that wastewater. And then we'll talk a little bit about advanced treatment. Another big change since Amy and I started this journey is that we now have a much more robust body of practice and understanding around some of the mechanical systems available to treat wastewater before the dispersal or septic field, to accommodate things like our food economy or brewing, or simply to ensure that dispersal and septic fields don't die a horrible death from being overloaded with wastewater. So any questions on those? Comments or barbed remarks? I just wanted to make sure we use some of we got these terms sort of out up front. So our funding infrastructure in Vermont is still basically set up to fund the type of community wastewater systems that are in Bennington or Manchester or Burlington, not to deal with our small community issues. There's this very neat framework where a town applies for clean water SRF loans, they do preliminary engineering, they develop an engineering plan, they hold a bond vote, and then they pay it back after everybody connects to the system. And unfortunately, in our small communities, that doesn't accommodate a lot of our reality of finance and people and bad soils and budgets and voters who aren't sure about this, let alone something fun like COVID. But we are starting to find ways within that framework to really work in ways that are beneficial for small communities. The big barriers we really see now are getting started. We continue, Amy and I will get called to a community to do a talk, and and a group of individuals will think it's great. You take it to the community or your select board and it's, why do we need to do this at all? Even in places that have real challenges, like a sketchy system serving a town office, you'll still get, why do we need to do this? We've managed for a couple hundred years. Why do we do this? What's going to get better? Why do we have to do it now is also something that is a really important challenge. Unless there is an active failure, it's not likely that the state of Vermont is going to say, okay, Shaftesbury, you must do something about wastewater now. You're probably not going to get that. So what we get a lot of is what we call is just defining the why. Why do we have to do it at all? Why do we have to do it now? We also see some skepticism about, should towns really be taking this on when it only benefits a few individuals, and getting over that mindset is hard too. And then getting there, there's a lot of things you have to figure out. Who's going to start the process? Who's going to push the process? Do we have any town staff who can do this? Do we have the Regional Planning Commission to help? How do we get land for a dispersal field or a septic field is hugely important. Figuring out cost, and not just figuring out the cost, but explaining it to your select board, your voters, your treasurer. That takes a lot of time and energy. Figuring out, okay, if we decide we do have to do this, are we going to make this mandatory? That can trip communities up even before they start the process. Well, we don't want to force anybody. So given that, should we even try this process? And you will see anybody who embarks in this is going to get questions, or we're going to see huge growth, huge change, or we're going to do this and nothing gets better. And working through that is really challenging. So what Amy and I often work with communities on is, what's your why? What is the why of why do we have to do it at all? Why do we have to do it now? And is it really a community job to advance this? And defining that and coming up with that speech and that common understanding is definitely the first and probably the most important job you have if you're gonna try to get started. And again, getting through that, getting there, the questions, our typical model of, here's your preliminary engineering, here's your bond vote, here's your system. It doesn't fund or direct that work of getting there, but there are some good new ways that we can address that. So what have we seen change in like the last five to almost 10 years now? Number one is we've worked out how to have towns pass through Clean Water State Revolving Act funds to upgrade, build, or expand privately owned systems, whether those serve an individual property or serve a group of properties. That's huge because it lets a community target a group of properties that may need that capacity and work in a way that gets that very inexpensive financing through to them, where previously they were on their own. It was maybe Vermont Economic Development Authority can help. Maybe you're just stuck going to a bank. So that's a big innovation that we want to get the word out about. We've also figured out how to do the engineering, permitting, and financing for what I would call a hybrid system, where a community has maybe a few individual on-site systems and then a couple of cluster systems. And we can now bring those to A&R as a group and say, this is our project. It has 6 pieces. And now we know how to sort of fund and package that. That definitely wasn't the case when things like the Pownell system were going through. I would say we've also gotten better at figuring out how to bring in multiple funding streams, and then how to illustrate those in a way that says, here's the ultimate cost to users if we've got this grant, and this SRF loan. And so given that, there's some front end work that can be done on the town end on developing your why, why do we need to do this, understanding and starting to think through these different options, and landowner outreach that we've seen really help communities get ahead and be ready to go when they decide, okay, we're going to take this initiative. There's some pieces you can have done up front that make that a lot easier. So a quick little tour of Waitsfield. The Community Wastewater Loan Fund program in Waitsfield is basically a pass-through of north of $1 million in Clean Water State Revolving Fund money. The town administers a funding program where individual private property owners and a couple of groups of property owners have borrowed money from the town and are paying that back every month. And then the town makes an annual payment on the debt service for the bond that funded the whole group of systems. Janet has known me a long time, but this even predates how long I've known Janet. Back in 1997, when I started working at the Mad River Planning District and had one child, we were in the Waitsfield, 1,700 people tried the typical process, the neat, tidy 4-step process. And I wouldn't say it was like a COVID kind of surprise. It was more like a giant meteor that just blew that whole thing up. We had failed bond votes and a drain field that was not the capacity that was advertised, and a $13 million proposed system to meet 2/3 of our need. It was not pretty. And for about 6 years, this project sat, and the town was on the hook to pay back almost $700,000 in clean water SRF engineering fees. Don't try this at home, unless the town found a way to move forward with this system. So 2010, we started back into this process and redefined our why. Why did we need to do this? It was largely the food economy that drove this, because we had the food hub, the Mad River Food Hub, 2 brew pubs, and a restaurant that were on really struggling, and in one cases, a failed septic system. There was the prospect of Lawson's Finest Liquids coming into town and doing something cool, and that the lack of wastewater was an absolute non-starter. So I'm not going to lie, it definitely helped when the system serving the Big Picture Theater actively failed and we had surfacing effluent. That's not the kind of pee cycling Kat wanted to talk about. That was a big regulatory
opportunity.
It was a great opportunity. It did give a kick of the why that we wouldn't have had otherwise. But the food economy was really a big driver. There was a real desire that prosper and find the flexibility that they needed. And that got the town to say, okay, we're going to pick this back up and we're going to try to figure it out. So What we have today is 5 individual privately owned, 4 are privately owned, 1 is the town office, but we have 5 individual systems that were financed as a package. Permitted, finance, designed all together as one thing, and we got that through ANR's prescribed process for funding it through the Clean Water SRF. 3 of those serve a food-related use. 2 of them, the business park and the winter park system, serve multiple property owners going to a combined treatment system and then a combined leach field. 2 of them are straight up conventional on-site septic systems without pretreatment. One is the town office. The other is the Lynn property, which has a grease trap for a small restaurant. But, basically we financed a basic septic system through this program. That is an option where that gets you the capacity you need and the flexibility you need to use these properties actively. The other 3 have local folk, Irisville, Winter Park, have advanced treatment systems on them that are costly, but again, they really work when you want to be able to do food-related uses and brewing. So the total construction cost was about $750,000 for this. Add back all the engineering and the other schnew, and I think the total package finance was about $1.5 million. But that was complicated and probably not a good model. But the systems themselves were anywhere from the cheap and cheerful for the town office up to $500,000 for the big winter park system. So again, the message we want to get out is there's a lot more flexibility today in defining a suite of wastewater projects that can be brought together as a package and that can include direct assistance to private property owners, where the town simply acts as an intermediary. Explaining that, doing the spreadsheets on that, I'll give you my business card. That was a lot of that is just the laying it out so that your clerk treasurer, your select board, your voters can really see how this would work and develop the confidence and go through the what ifs. What if the winter park system, misses 3 payments on that? What if there's a bankruptcy of one of the people attached to a cluster system? How do we work through that? And we've got a good package of loan agreements, protective covenants, financial guarantees and such that we're now able to share out with other communities on that. So again, this is fun. Janet, I know, is laughing. So these are my daughters when we restarted the Waitsfield project in 2010. One of the things we can tell you is that there is a lot of work that has to be done and money that has to be spent on sitting down and talking through with bankers, doing financial illustrations, getting a line of credit for your town so you can handle cash flow, paying your town attorney to do more easements and loan documents than would usually go with a conventional sewer system. The engineering is going to be different because you might be doing multiple systems. In our cases, with 2 different engineers doing some of the design. But when that gives you flexibility and lets you meet needs and meet some of your private property owners' needs, we've got good models for making that happen. It's just that you have to expect that you're going to be spending money on time and professional services that aren't just engineering. Nobody minds spending the money on the engineer, but then it's the lawyer, the planner. I think they all walk into a bar, working with a condo association lawyer to draw up a document for a group of property owners. It's different, but it can get the job done. So some of the challenges, shared systems are a challenge because you've got to figure out how to allocate that financial responsibility. Maybe one is owned with there's a landowner that owns the disposal field, and then you got 6 people who want to attach to a system there. It's not a lot of fun, but One of the cool things we did in Waitsfield was figure out how to use Vermont's condominium association law to create what we called a wastewater only association. Steve Stitzel came up with this, and by golly, it worked. So we have a framework for bringing together property owners legally to share a wastewater system and the financial and physical responsibility for it without screwing up their mortgages, their other associations, it doesn't create an encumbrance on the property that was seen as undue. So that's something else that we're able to share, that when you've got a situation where you have one good drain field and a bunch of people who need it, we can offer a framework that can work. I can't promise that the people will all behave, but you can get there. Financing, again, there are good new tools. Besides the ability to pass through the Clean Water SRF to private property owners, we now have the ability to use a 30-year loan term instead of 20-year. That is big when you're looking at the ultimate monthly payment that people have to make. Our infrastructure, when it's well maintained with these pre-treatment systems for on-site, it performs well. There's confidence it can do 30 years. The bond bank has gotten accustomed to the idea of 30 years. That really helps on affordability. What doesn't go away is the need to do the projections, explain it, figure it out, put it in terms of your town's reserve funds needed, cash flow needed, et cetera. It's more complicated, it takes more explaining, but we really do have some good new affordability tools besides just the fact that the Clean Water SRF has that money right now. And then the other really great success, and I'm going to hand this off to Amy, is that there's just a better understanding in our engineering community and our regulatory community about how to use these advanced treatment systems responsibly and effectively to provide small community solutions. I guarantee you this was not the case in 1998 and 1999 when the Warren Elementary School system started surfacing effluent on the kindergarten playground in January. It was awesome. And our regulators, who shall remain nameless, were having none of this idea of using these boxes to magically treat the wastewater. But the technologies have come a long way. We have operators who are trained to maintain these things. We've got a good track record. We've done a lot of troubleshooting. And they can, now we know they're going to get a permit. And we know that we've got good performance, including for these food related and other uses. We've also gotten over another sort of mind meld that the only point to doing wastewater treatment and advanced treatment was you just want more capacity and more growth. In a couple cases, including Waitsfield, we didn't add that much capacity, but what we added is flexibility for changing land use. I want to add 3 more restaurant seats. I don't need a bigger restaurant. I just need more seats. Or I want to add takeout to the deli, and that's going to increase your design flow. It's not going to create new growth. And our regulators and our designers get that now. So we're able to go in and say, hey, we need a village solution. We're going to do pre-treatment, not so we can add more housing units, but so that we have more flexibility with the building stock that we have. That message has really resonated with a lot of places. And now we know how to engineer for that, and our regulators will approve that, which is great. Super quick, and we can come back to these. Couple of illustrations just to show what this looks like when it's built. There's an aerial view of Waitsfield. And there's the famous Warren Elementary School system that was done in the dark January of 2000. That's working great today. So I'm going to hand this over to Amy, and Amy, I'll be happy to just click when you say so.
Yeah, please just go ahead and click. So I would like to we're very close now to getting to have some discussion and hear the questions that you have for us, but I want to leave you with a couple of slides worth of thinking, because I know we have communities in your region that maybe in mid-process, maybe are done with their process and are maintaining systems, and who are maybe thinking about starting, but we don't even know where to begin. So if you're starting, welcome to the show. And the first best thing you can do as a community, whether it's with your regional planning commission or as a planning commission, is to look around at what you have. Really start to think about why you would want to embark on this road, especially if you are a town with smaller population, you have a relatively small village area. We used to do a lot of feasibility studies that looked at entire municipalities or large areas of your town. What we have found over the years is that it works a lot better if you have some idea of the why before you start the feasibility study. If you have an area that you want to focus on, if it's just one part of your village, the central core that you adore and has big problems and is right next to a river, okay, start there. If that's where you want to foster adaptive reuse and a really vibrant village, it's a great place to start. But it's going to be different for everyone. So what are your unique challenges and what's your vision? Your RPC folks are great allies. They can help you find resources. They can help you find funding solutions, build local capacity. We're starting to see a lot more of that in a few different areas of the state, where the folks at the RPCs are getting more familiar with all this crazy terminology that we use and can really be resources to you. And I would say that folks like Julie Beth and I are more than happy to be resources to you as well as you embark on these journeys. So please definitely reach out to us, because I mean, I grew up on this stuff and it takes a long time to make it work, but when it works, it's really rewarding and wonderful. Julie Beth talked a bunch about the funding and how you can get into the Clean Water SRF and how we can make that work for small projects. Having said that, I took a picture of the preliminary, the engineering ESA that we have for another small town in Chittenden County that we're working with, and it is literally this thick to do a preliminary engineering report update. So you may want to rely a little bit more on local resources that don't require as much paperwork to start to define your why and to start to hone in on, is there a project that you want to do and what is it with regard to community wastewater? One thing that I would recommend to anyone who is starting on this is to just look around you. Look at a soil map and look at the property that your town or institutions within your town that might be cooperators or collaborators own and control. Because if you are a small municipality and you have a big sandy field that maybe is under a school playground and you can get water to flow there, you're a long ways down the road already to having a solution that might work for your village or the area that you're concerned about. And you don't necessarily need an engineer to tell you that. They would hate me for saying that, but it's true. So thank you, JB. I was just going to ask for that. There are a few communities down in your area who one of whom I worked with as a staff scientist long ago in Shaftesbury, who have started a process, but maybe are stuck or have put it aside because it was too expensive, or other things came up that were higher priority. If you're one of those communities, it's a pretty straightforward thing to start by looking at what you have, but be aware of how old it is if you've put it aside for a while. Around 2013, the landscape of planning for community wastewater projects that get either Clean Water SRF or USDA rural development money to fund design and construction changed pretty radically, because Clean Water SRF and USDA Rural Development came up with this unified engineering report, unified engineering report, but also unified engineering sort of contracting, such that no matter what funding opportunity you and your project decide to pursue, you will have checked all the boxes for any of those funding programs, which is a real benefit, especially if you are going towards a more centralized project. It does create a lot of work for you up front, especially for a small project. So to the extent that you can get out in front of that by working on little chunks of it, using municipal planning grant money or local funds to start figuring out your why, figure out the things that the Clean Water SRF or USDA Rural Development is going to pay for anyway, and just start to get your ducks in a row that way. One final but really critical thing for a successful project is, and it goes back to that figuring out your why. If you are working towards a vision that is articulated well in your town plan, that is backed up by your land use and zoning regs, and that really focuses development, your vision of development, towards a center village area or another area that you are interested in enhancing with both adaptive reuse, potentially expansion, changes in housing, more affordable housing, just all of those things that we love about our village centers. If it is articulated in your plan and in your regulations, it makes the path towards a project that may involve community wastewater treatment infrastructure or water infrastructure for that matter, flow a lot better through the permitting, design, and implementation process. So I'm going to shut up now. And I'm really excited to hear your questions and have some discussion.
Great, thank you guys for that wonderful presentation. And as you said, at this point, we are really hoping that our commissioners, many of whom have already been thinking about this extensively for a number of years, can bring their specific questions. Don't be shy. These ladies have been working on this for many years, so don't pull your punches. Let's hear your questions.
I think I saw something in the chat about traditional leach fields versus the Presby systems. And I would say that when it comes to the part where the wastewater meets the soil, there are a lot of options available now that weren't available when I started doing this work. Anything from the traditional gravel, perf pipe, absorption trench, up to drip irrigation dispersal that can be done in a very non-invasive way. So we have a much broader range of options for technology to get our wastewater into the ground. The Presby is a decent one. But it is one of many possibilities. And I would say that I think we have a good range now of potential options for putting wastewater into the ground. And it really does come down to what your site conditions are, what the best fit is for that individual situation.
And Amy, if you wouldn't mind, just so everybody's on the same page, could you describe what the Presby system is relative to the traditional leach field?
Sure. So the Presby it's kind of well, it depends on which of their options you're talking about, but the one that I'm most familiar with is it's kind of a modified absorption trench where you have a larger diameter pipe that has a specialized coating on the outside. Wastewater goes into the pipe, percolates through that coating and goes into a sand bed, and then ultimately infiltrates into the soil and subsurface. So they just are modifying the part outside the perf pipe and before you get to the soil.
For what purpose?
For what purpose? So the Presby systems have an approval as a slightly advanced leach field technology so that they can load the leach field at a higher loading rate than with a conventional wastewater system. So it's kind of on the range of pretreatment options, it is kind of the cheap and cheerful option because it's quite cost effective. It works pretty well at the individual home scale or at the very small commercial scale. Where it starts to fall apart is with higher strength wastewater. So some of these like restaurant or brewing, that sort of, bakeries, those sorts of uses, they tend to have a high premature failure rate if you're applying them in that situation.
What would you use in that situation, Amy?
In that situation, we would definitely recommend some sort of advanced treatment that is appropriate to the strength of the wastewater that you're trying to manage. What they're using at Lawson's and at the Winter Park system is Advantex BioClear systems, which are a trickling recirculating filter, and they're big and tall, but buried in the ground. So you don't really see them. The one that Julie Beth showed us from Warren is an Advantex system, which is a textile filter. A similar idea, but they're using sheets of geotextile with really high surface area to volume ratio that you're dosing septic tank effluent onto at a really regular pace, recirculating that through the filters over and over until you get to a pretty high quality treated effluent, and then that gets dispersed into a soil-based leach field. So again, there's a bunch of options. Yay, thank you for the link.
Yep.
And it can be engineered or designed to the situation that you're dealing with.
And do those filtration systems need regular replacement, I guess?
Well, they need
One of
maintenance.
the expenses of these systems?
They need maintenance. They don't necessarily need replacement.
Okay.
There was a generation of filters, the peat filters that Boardnamona peat, which was one of the first advanced treatments that got some market in Vermont. And that was one where you had to replace a particular filter medium. The ones that are serving these larger uses, they need an O&M, a contract O&M operator, but it's not really so much replacement. But yes, you do have to have a budget for the O&M. That's part of your whole financial analysis that you do. It's higher for some of the advanced treatment, but again, you're getting back taxable grand list value in some cases for, when you can redevelop with those systems in place.
I did see another question go by in the chat, but I didn't see what it was.
Do we measure wastewater flow by water meter readings?
That's a good question. I think it depends quite a bit on your individual situation. If you were putting together a community wastewater system, you would have options for how you decided to charge users. They could be per connection. It could be flow-based. In Warren, when that shared system up to Brooks Field under their recreation field was built, they did install water meters, even though everybody is on individual water supply systems. And there was a component of the user fee that was based on flow. I believe they have stopped doing that. It just wasn't worth the pain for them. And they had enough flow data to understand what was happening at the individual connections to realize that for their system, it didn't necessarily make sense, even though they had initially wanted to do that to encourage water conservation and to preserve the life of the leach fields. Did that answer the question, or did it spark more questions?
I have a question. If Julie Beth, you mentioned specifically how enthusiastic some of the folks are now about um, approving systems to accommodate, adaptive reuse and minor additions to buildings and things as opposed to new development. But what about the notion of new development? I mean, we're not talking about building a, new city, but a lot of our villages really do want some new development, some additional housing in particular, and some small, small commercial uses.
Well, and they should. I think in the past, there was always an assumption that doing a wastewater system was going to induce growth, which has never panned out. And so I think what the desire is now is to see that it's, like Amy said, that the community has its town plan, any designations in place from the state, whether it's a village center, neighborhood development area, and that there's a compelling why, that there's been an analysis and this is what we're hoping for. There's a component of the report that the thick project, preliminary engineering report that will require analysis of projected growth with the project. If that's the desired pattern, then you just gotta say so. Mm-hmm. I think where we've seen an improvement is that it was just always this assumption that there was going to be unintended growth if you touched the wastewater systems and added any capacity. And I think that fear factor has finally abated, and there's much greater recognition of the other land use benefits besides supporting growth where that's desired.
Thanks. It's interesting. One of the phenomena that I've seen over the years that I've been here talking about, many years involved in the process, is that, towns have gotten really, they develop pretty progressive, thoughtful plans for their village centers with, where they wanted new development and the density of development, and then just became so frustrated over time because they weren't able to do it that, in some cases, the plans and the land use regulations, they said, well, those are never going to work. So they've kind of jettisoned those. And so, so now maybe their real aspiration may not really be well reflected in their plans anymore. So I think it's a good argument, I guess, for really doing that first planning study to get you back on where you want to be.
Yeah, I highly recommend that. Just even if it's a reboot to a vision that you thought would work and ran into a wall of capacity limitation, there's a lot has changed in the last 5 to 7 years, and it may be, and not just in regulation, but in the state's attitude towards, there's finally in the last few years, I would say, a recognition from state agencies that we have to foster soil-based community wastewater planning and development for right-sized village infrastructure if we want the benefits of villages. It's possible I have a soapbox. I might be standing on it.
I saw that we had 2 more questions come in the chat. So one is there any regulatory recognition of European style waste to value solid recovery systems? That's fertilizer gray water. Is this part of adaptive reuse?
I wish I could say yes, but I'm not gonna. I know there's some really interesting stuff happening with Rich Earth Institute. Our state infrastructure, I would say, despite having helped Carl Etnier install his urine separating toilet in East Montpelier in 2022, there has not really been a wider acceptance of that really useful and appropriate European technology.
And Rich Earth Institute is the organization that I've worked with and on the board of. They're based out of Brattleboro. So Bruce, who just asked that question, I can point you in the direction of them if you're not already aware of them. They're bringing that model to Vermont, but I can testify too that they have recently run into some regulatory barriers in scaling up what they're doing. So the conversations being had about that resource recovery technology, and it seems to be an iterative process. This might be our final question if we don't receive any more. We had the question of how many households can you typically have on one of these systems that you have been talking about?
There's a lot of possibility there. You can go anywhere from a single family home, which could be 70 gallons per person, 2 people per bedroom, 2-bedroom minimum, up to tens of thousands of gallons per day. There are a few indirect discharge permitted systems at ski resorts that are treating well over 50, 80, 90,000 gallons worth of wastewater per day. Those have pre-treatment, they're pretty big leach fields, they're pretty highly managed systems, but they're serving large populations and multiple uses. So
This is,
go ahead.
oh, sorry, the system, I think a good example that we're working on right now for Westford is would be about 12,000 gallons, 2,000 is reserve capacity. So call it 10,000 and it's 42 equivalent residential units with a total project cost in the ballpark of 2 million, which sounds like a lot until you back out the math. And if you were choosing between a mound system for your house and what your monthly fee will be in Westford, you definitely go for the community system.
Yeah.
Do we have any final questions for our presenters? I feel like we could proceed to have this conversation for another 2 hours and get into all levels of detail and the specifics of our various communities. It's a shame that we can't do that tonight, unfortunately. But I believe you have both expressed a willingness to be contacted by anyone in our region that might have some follow-up questions or be moving forward with any of this. So I can share your email contacts with the commission if that's all right with you.
Yes, please do. And we can share the slides that we presented today as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, that'd be great. If you could send us the presentations
Yeah, you
with the
bet.
contact information, we'll make sure we get it on our website too. So thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you,
All
Julie,
right.
Beth, and Amy.
Thanks, everybody. Hi, Janet.
Yeah, so nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
It's
you.
great talking with you.
Virtual applause.
Bye.
Thanks so much, and thanks, Kat, for organizing that for us. I'm gonna run right into the next part of the program for tonight, and we're basically have very short overview presentations from our staff. We just want to give people an opportunity to ask any follow-up questions with a few of these projects that we've been working on lately. So the first one that I have on the agenda is a brief discussion of shared streets with Mark Anders, who has been working on a project with the town of Bennington on the Franklin Lane, which is adjacent to the Putnam redevelopment project, but it's an example of a shared streets project. Mark?
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm just going to give you I promise it'll only be a 3-minute PowerPoint. I'm going to share my screen. This project is one that you really have to show pictures of it. So, all right. And now I'm going to go to, good. Can you see that?
we can see your share, yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch. You know what? I won't even do that. I'll just do this.
That looks great.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're talking about Franklin Lane, which is I would call it an alley in downtown Bennington. And I think probably a lot of people know where it is. If you don't, this is the Four Corners in Bennington. The little yellow rectangle is the alley, is Franklin Lane. And it's important because a lot of people park in this municipal parking lot and then go to downtown. And it's also become very important because it's right adjacent to the Putnam Block redevelopment project, which you see outlined here in blue. So this Franklin Lane project really complements the Putnam Block project. And so just to give you a big picture, we did a scoping study for improvements to the alley a few years ago, and now the town of Bennington, with our assistance, has gotten a downtown transportation fund grant to kind of implement some of the recommendations that we recommended. So this is what the alley looks like today, and this is from the other direction. And I guess the problem with it really is it's ugly and people drive way too fast through it and almost mow down pedestrians. And I should know that because this building here on the side is where the BCRC office is. And it's also very dark at night. There's almost no lighting. Somebody has, if people can mute their mics. I think we're picking up some background noise from somebody. That would be great. Thank you. And so the solution is to do something called a shared street or a Woonerf. I guess that's what the Dutch call it. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples to show you kind of what we're talking about. This is a project in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So this is sort of like the before picture. And this is the after picture. So what a shared street is, it's a street where pedestrians and cars are allowed. Usually priority in the design is given to pedestrians, but you can drive down it if you really have to. It's not encouraged, but if you have to make a delivery or you're lost and you need to cut through, you can. This is another shot of Winthrop Street. And usually there's pavers and there's no curbs. Everything is at the same level. That's a typical design. Here's another before and after. A lot of people probably know this. This is where the Harvard Coop is here in Cambridge. And this is what it looks like now. So again, no real defined street. You can drive through it if you want to, but you're going to go pretty slow because obviously you're sharing the space with pedestrians. This is another shot, so you can see somebody is driving down it. And this is a local example. This is in Williamstown, Massachusetts, right outside the Purple Pub. Although it's not really a street, it's kind of a shared space, kind of the same idea. And lastly, this is a example from Brighton in the UK. If you Google Woonerfs and shared streets, you'll get many, many great examples. So I'm excited. I'm excited about this project. We're working on the conceptual plans with MSK Engineering now, and we think we can construct it in the spring. So that will be really nice to see, and it really goes well with the Putnam Block project, which is right next door, and which I think you'll be hearing about next from Bill. So are there any questions about this project?
So you highlighted just that little bit in yellow. Will this go all the way, or is it just the little bit in yellow?
This project is only the little bit in yellow. When we did the scoping study, originally we did all of Franklin Lane, but I think you know, the downtown transportation fund grants are fairly small. So we wanted to start with this, which is the most important section. And then as the Putnam block gets finished, you know, maybe in the future, we can do this as a town, maybe a town project. But the rest of the lane does need to be improved too. But the yellow part is really key because it's right next to downtown. But that's a good question.
And Janet, this is Bill, but I would just add on to that as part of the Putnam project, extending from the end of that yellow section in a westerly direction, there are new sidewalks, curb cuts, some plaza areas that have been installed as part of the Putnam project. So there are upgrades further along Franklin, which were privately done as well.
So maybe not as much need in the end.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a dynamic too with the that rectangular building right across the way there. That's the Armory building, and that's I believe in the process of being acquired by the town in a trade with the state for the National Guard, moving to some town property. So that there's a lot of potential for controlling what that's going to look like. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I will stop sharing.
Mark?
Thank you very much, Mark. And you know, if people have any follow-up questions on these, feel free to contact us.
Jim, I do have a quick announcement or request.
Good.
Good. So we have a transportation advisory committee that meets every couple of months on all kinds of topics, and I think it's really an opportunity to recommend projects, state projects, talk about transportation policy in the region and the state. And we are looking for new members for this committee. So if you are interested, please email me or Jim and let me know. We have a meeting coming up in December, and it's a pretty minimal time commitment. We meet every other month for about an hour. We really need new members, and I think it's going to be an exciting year for the TAC because we're finally allowed to request new projects from the state. So just putting that out there.
How many members, Mark?
How many members? We need, I don't know, we could use 5 to 10 new members. You know, ideally we have one from every town, plus some at-large members, but we've kind of dwindled. You know, we only have a few people showing up to meetings in the last year, and part of that is just because the state is redoing their whole project prioritization process, but that's almost done. So I think a lot of the regions are sort of revamping their tax now. So if you're really interested in transportation, we have room for you. That's the short answer.
So there aren't any particular criteria one needs to meet or experience or what have you?
No, there aren't. I mean, not really. I think just an interest in transportation issues is the main thing, or planning. Yep. Let
Thank you. I'm sure we'll get at least a couple members out of that solicitation. So, so let us run into our next presentation. Everybody's favorite thing that they always want, everybody always asks me about for an update on the Putnam redevelopment project. And so Bill Calvin, who's been working a lot on that, I will turn it over to Bill.
Great. Thanks very much, Jim. Yeah, I feel like the previous two presentations were the perfect lead-in. Wastewater, talking about complex funding mechanisms and bringing a whole bunch of funding sources to bear to make a project happen. We're certainly on point. And then with Mark talking about Franklin Lane in the site of Putnam, feels like we're right on point. So I think most people are familiar with the Putnam block redevelopment. Phase 1 is a $31 million redevelopment and adaptive reuse of 3 historic structures in downtown: the former Penny Saver Courthouse building, the Hotel Putnam, and the Winslow building. You know, it's interesting. I know Franklin Lane has been conceptualized for redevelopment for a number of years. I first started working on Putnam in 1999. And phase one is, about to be complete here at the end of this month, at least with regard to substantial completion for the first phase of the project. So yeah, 21-year overnight success, I guess, with Putnam. But the good news is, despite the challenges of getting the project up and running, the fortunate opportunity of widespread community support and a number of individuals, institutions, and local leaders stepping up to make this project happen, we are close to completing that initial phase, which is going to involve a number of retail spaces, a new restaurant, cafe, bookshop, visiting nurses will be putting their offices in that space. Looks like an additional healthcare occupancy will take place. Global Z, I saw Dimitri on the call earlier, will be moving their corporate headquarters to the second floor of the courthouse. And the Bennington College Development Office will also be taking space at the second floor of the Winslow building. In addition, there will be 31 residential units, and we will be beginning to move people into those units next month in December. So we're going to begin to welcome 31 new families to downtown Bennington, beginning as early as December and rolling out into the first quarter of 2021. A number of those commercial occupancies that I noted will begin in the first quarter of 2021, and we expect those to kind of continue through the first 2 quarters of the year. We're virtually full with regard to occupancy. At this point, there are a couple of about 3 smallish remaining spaces left in the entire project, which encompasses 75,000 square feet of adaptive reuse. And we were honored, BCRC, in conjunction with its partner, the Bennington County Industrial Corporation, just received an award from the International Economic Development Council, which is the leading worldwide economic development organization in hundreds of countries around the world with economic developers. The Putnam Block Redevelopment Project and BCRC's work on it received a bronze award in real estate redevelopment and reuse. And we were competing against communities 200,000 population and under. So significantly larger than certainly our region, but shows what a community can do coming together with vision and, more importantly, real commitment. BCRC's work has been integral to this. We certainly worked most recently in the project, again, in conjunction with BCIC, to provide some local coordination, serve as a local point, and create many of the funding mechanisms as pass-through funding mechanisms with BCRC and BCIC. But really, our work on that project started much earlier and was certainly facilitated by area-wide planning work that we did in conjunction with Stone Environmental, who was on our call earlier today as well. So our fingerprints are certainly all over the project. It is a real community success story. And despite some challenges in getting it up and running and some shutdown as a result of COVID, we're about 3.5 months late, but by early December, we'll be starting to see occupancies at Putnam. So that was detailed in the newsletter, and I would be happy certainly to answer any questions that folks have about that project.
Not seeing
Great.
any questions at the moment,
Thank
but
you.
if anybody does have a question, feel free to follow up with Bill. Like I said, I would say at our offices, but not at our offices, but we can track them down. So next up, we're going to have Jonathan Cooper, our Community and Economic Development Specialist, just talking about some recent successful economic development grants. Jonathan?
Hello, everyone. So I am happy to have a chance to talk to you tonight about 2 grant programs that we've been working on, one annual, the other COVID related. And I'll begin with the Building Communities Grants Program. I think that this one might be a little pretty familiar to some of you, but this is an annual suite of grant programs that are administered jointly, some by the Office of Buildings and General Services, others through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development's Historic Preservation program. And the one of the interesting things about this, one of the tranches is one where we try to sponsor a few applicants each year, and that is the Regional Economic Development Grant Program. And this is an interesting opportunity for businesses because it presents a chance to receive some state funds in furtherance of projects that would grow or retain jobs. And that require capital investments for facilities upgrades, especially. We've had some pretty good luck with this program over the last 5 years or so, bringing in a good bit of money to a number of projects. And in the last few years, we've tried to spread that out a little bit around the region. Some projects in Manchester and Dorset in the last 2 years. We've been able to get some support for expansions and for businesses in those towns. But this year, we submitted 3 applications. 2 of them were successful, and that provided $10,000 apiece to 2 businesses in Bennington that are in the process of becoming. The first is Farm Road Brewery, which is sort of sits catty corner to the Putnam Block redevelopment, where there's a small sort of tap house that's being put in place there. And the second is the was a Brush Mill Cidery. And this is a cider producing facility that has its production in the Shields Drive portion industrial park in Bennington, and will be also, I believe, be a part of providing some wares for consumption in a forthcoming restaurant to be slated within the Putnam Block redevelopment. And so these are pretty good examples. $10,000 a piece, that's not the entirety of one's program or one's project cost, but it does allow us to say that the state is here to support economic development, particularly where it's leads to entrepreneurial activities and new jobs, or the retention of jobs and expanded productivity. So that was, we try to get in 2 or 3 applications each year. We try to work around the region to bring this to businesses from Pownell up to Peru. And we look forward, we're hoping to have a rather shortened application cycle. This past year was delayed due to the coronavirus. And so we learned about these awards about a month and a half ago. The hope is that it'll go back to the fiscal year cycle, and that we might be able to work with some other businesses in just about 6 months' time to work up some applications with them. I'll pivot now to the second of the 2 programs that I had wanted to talk about. And before I do, I'll mention that in addition to that regional economic development grants, the Building Communities Grants Program also has separate tranches of funding for educational facilities, for recreational facilities, historic preservation, and health and human services. So certainly it'd be great, the more our commissioners are familiar with this program, the better. There's a lot of need, and what's exciting is that Bennington County performs pretty well given some of the competition around the states. When we take all those programs together that I just mentioned, there was about $820,000 available, and about $95,000 of that is coming to businesses, nonprofits, municipalities, schools in Bennington County. So it's certainly an area where our organizations have shown a lot of fluency and a lot of investment. And so we're happy to see it be supported in whatever way it can. So moving to the Restart Vermont Technical Assistance Grant Program. This was a sort of a short-term program that has been stood up by the state with some CARES Act funding. It was administered by our colleagues at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. And the goal was to get businesses in the region, in our region, businesses around the state, to take advantage of opportunities for technical assistance, so for consulting. So not for capital expenditures for building something new, but for consulting with an architect who could give you some designs for what a expansion might look like. The idea here was to find out where was a lot of businesses found themselves asking themselves, how do I pivot? What do I need to shift? What new patterns do I need to anticipate or adapt to? And how can I do that? The thought is, with so many businesses not having funds on hand to make those kinds of investments in technical assistance and in consulting, the idea was to provide a little bit of a spark for that. And so over the last few months, in close collaboration with Callie Fishburne, our BCRC Vista, we reached out to dozens and dozens of businesses, and we're presenting them with this grant program and what can we do to help work up a scope of work, what services do you need, and then to try to speak with vendors around the region. Can you provide some services so that businesses in our region and around the state can link up with you? And the thought being that a grant of up to $3,000 would be the average award, could go to the vendor on behalf of the client businesses. I'm just going to run the numbers. We got some really good distribution in a lot of ways, and I'd like to talk about that for just a moment with you. We were able to submit 23 completed scopes of work that 19 client businesses around the region had developed. 3 of those businesses submitted multiple scopes that were somewhat smaller, but they had a few needs, and they were able to get them met. So the total value there was $57,834 of technical assistance coming to 19 businesses around the region. What was most exciting was that 9 vendors around the region were providing those services. So in some ways, the value of the services goes to the client business, but the actual cash will flow to the vendors. So we're glad to see that $29,230 of that 57.8 that I mentioned earlier is cash going to vendors around the region. The primary uptake was in Bennington with 10 clients. Manchester had 5 client businesses, and then 2 apiece in Arlington and Rupert. But I'll sort of close by mentioning that we had a lot of good spread around industries, by ownership types, 5 nonprofits, 1 cooperative, 6 sole proprietors, 8 larger employer clients. We saw a distribution between the arts, hospitality, food services, professional services, retail, human services, manufacturing, construction, and outdoor recreation. So really running the gamut of our towns, running the gamut of our industries. And so the hope is that we could see some businesses that were making a lot of pivots to online activities, and businesses that want to make investments in their space and needed to work with some designers to flesh that out a little bit. Others that needed to get some of their production, their inventory up online or out into catalogs for consumption. So all in all, a pretty successful program. About 5% of the total available funding is coming to these Bennington County businesses, and we look forward to any potential expansion of that program. We do have a bit of a backlog of businesses that we can work with, and if it ends up being the case that more funding is available, we will certainly get the word out as quickly as possible. So between those 2 programs, that covers what I had to discuss today. I'm happy to entertain any questions on either one.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any questions on that?
Just a quick question. Jonathan, what was the formal name of that second grant program you mentioned?
The Restart Vermont Technical Assistance Program.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Not seeing any other real or virtual hands at the moment. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Henderson now, and I'm gonna since Jim is a multifaceted individual, I'm going to let him give a short pitch for the Brownfields program, maybe first, and then he's going to talk a little bit about the some work we've done with blight-resistant elm trees in collaboration with some local partners. Jim?
Thanks, Jim. Everybody can hear me, I guess. So kind of picking up where Bill left off, that whole redevelopment project was started off through an area-wide brownfield plan that we worked on about 5 years ago with Stone Environmental, and that was with a previous grant. Currently, we are in the 3rd year of a grant that we got in 2017, and that will fund both petroleum related substances and hazardous substances. We have about a year left, to spend down our money. And we've just finished up 2 projects, and I'm looking for new projects. So anybody out there that knows about an underutilized or abandoned piece of property with a high likelihood of having either petroleum or hazardous materials, please give me a call. Often these properties will sit idle for many years because people do not know what contaminants they're dealing with and how it will impact their plans financially and in the long term. So please think about your towns and properties that you've wondered about. Is anything ever going to happen and change here? Maybe we can work together and get some new enrollments into our program in this last year. So I'm going to shift gears in a rather dramatic way. I'm a founding member of the Battenkill Watershed Alliance, and our organization does not recognize the state border. The Battenkill Watershed is both within the states of Vermont and New York, and I think that's a significant component of our organization, is that we work with both state governments, and we have a strong partnership with the Green Mountain National Forest. I was at a board meeting this past winter, and a fellow board member mentioned to me about a elm tree restoration program that he heard about through the Nature Conservancy. So I followed up doing a little surfing on their website, and sure enough, I found a link to an American elm restoration program that they have partnered with other organizations. And I made a contact through email and described to them some of the riparian restorative projects that we're working on, specifically trying to increase riparian buffer zones along the Battenkill and their tributaries by planting additional hardwoody debris and shrubbery. About a month went by, and I got a returned email from a guy named Christian Marks, who's a floodplain ecologist who works for the Nature Conservancy. He's very interested to hear more about what the Watershed Alliance and the Bennington County Conservation District have been working on. And we exchanged a few emails, and he said that he would be willing to jump over the mountains out of the Connecticut River watershed into the Battenkill and provide us with 5 varieties of blight-resistant American elm trees. The only conditions that these trees came with was that they had to be planted on protected land, conserved lands. And so I contacted Courtney Buckley, who's the fisheries biologist for our region from the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. And we did some field visits, and we decided that we would like to try to plant some of these elm trees on Vermont Fish and Wildlife fishing access sites along the Battenkill. And this met their qualifications or their stipulations as to where we could plant our trees. In September, I had a delivery of 32 elms. And in October, a couple other fellow members of the Battenkill Watershed Alliance and some members from the local Trout Unlimited chapter, we got together on October 24th. We planted 16 trees at the Red Mill Fish and Wildlife Access, which is just east of the New York-Vermont border on Route 313. 6 trees went on a piece of property that was given Battenkill Watershed Alliance, but then we turned over to the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife for an additional access site. This property is directly across from the confluence of the Green River that has been experiencing some severe erosion in the last few years since Irene. And then the last site that we planted 12 trees on, that was up on the Hill Farm Inn on Hill Farm Road in Sunderland. The Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department owns a 2-rod right-of-way along that entire stretch of river. So we have 5 different varieties. The Nature Conservancy also assisted with the planting, and they mapped them because they want to monitor the success of this project. Unfortunately, I was told that the Nature Conservancy's program is coming to an end. So my hopes was that we would get into a really good relationship with them and continue this. Instead, I'm going to try to contact the nursery that actually grew the plants for the Nature Conservancy and see if I can form a relationship with them if they're still willing and ready to provide us with elm trees. That's about it. I'm excited about what it might look like in another 50 years along the Battenkill to see some elm trees growing again like they once did. We'll see.
Thanks, Jim. Does anybody have any elm tree questions for Jim or want him to find an elm tree for you? Well, you know where to reach him. It's a great project, and we'd love to see some elm trees coming back in our region.
I just
yeah.
I know Dixie wrote in the comments, Jim, one possibility for a brownfield site. So check that out.
Okay, thanks, Dixie. Could you send me an email or give me a phone call and we'll talk?
You could talk a long time about that one, Jim. It's about the Johnson Control site. So.
Oh, okay, Johnson Control. Yeah, that's been on our radar for a very long time.
Long story there. So I got a couple more things to cover. One of them is Allison Stroll is going to talk to us about our favorite new piece of technology that counting cars may not sound exciting, but actually it's a pretty popular activity and can have some real benefits for town. So Allison, you want to mention our new toy?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Jim told me to keep it short and sweet, so I'm going to keep it super short and sweet. Please ask me any questions. So we had this really old, clunky, huge radar recorder. I think we got it used from VTrans probably a decade ago. It was having some internal issues and was no longer able to be repaired. And so we were toying with the idea of getting a new one. And so we just received that in September, and it is amazing. It's half the size, half the weight, has 2 battery packs. The company Jamar was amazing. They bundled it all together for us and they shipped it over. We had it a couple of days later. It was basically ready to go out of the box. So really, really amazing company if anyone needs a radar recorder. So anyways, it's a small little device and we hook it up to a utility pole. Jim Henderson helps me out. He's been doing all of it actually. we did a trial run in front of my house, and since then he's kind of taken it over because it's so easy and it's pretty cool. So anyways, we hook it up to the utility pole. You put in a few calculations into its individual little tablet laptop, which is really cool. It's on Bluetooth. So it's like even if you're in bad weather, you could just take it to your car and put in all the information you need. You can actually see live views of cars going by and it will tell you how fast they're going. And so we can run the speed study for 6 days at a time. That's the length of a battery. It does have the ability for us, if someone really wants like a 12-day study, we can, or longer. I mean, we technically could, because we have a second battery backup we could bring with us, switch it out. We have not done that yet. I'm not exactly sure how that works. It might be 2 studies, so you might lose a couple cars in the middle there as we're switching the battery over. But 6 days is usually like plenty of information, plenty of data to do a speed study for. So we run it for 6 days. We go pick it up, and then we get all the data back onto the computer that it comes with. And from there, we can develop a speed study. And that's Mark's domain there. We do have new software with it that came with the recorder, and we haven't really had a chance to dig in there, but I think it can calculate all these different percentile categories and then create charts and graphs and stuff. So I think it has a lot more capabilities than our previous one and the previous software had. Don't exactly know what that is quite yet, but it's a really neat piece of equipment. I'm really glad we got it. It's really compact, really neat. And Jim has set it up in Rupert and in Dorset, and I think the next one is Shaftesbury. So we also had a lot more information in our newsletter. If anyone wants a speed study done in their town, to either reach out to Jim or me. And I don't know if we'll be able to continue it through winter, probably not, but we might be able to squeeze one more in there. I'm not sure, but other than that, we can set it up in the spring. So Jim, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I completed a study in Sandgate last week, and I think I got 7 days out of the battery. So, but keep in mind, it's weather dependent, and we had some really nice weather. The first few days that I set that up, I was actually just wearing a t-shirt that day. Yesterday, I met with Dave Kiernan, and we set it up on a street in the village in Shaftesbury. Allison, you don't have to have a utility pole. We had an issue, utility pole in this particular road are right in the road bed. And why they moved when they built the sidewalk. But one of the parameters is that the recorder has to be 6 feet back from the road. And Dave came up with the brilliance of attaching it to a piece of recreational equipment near a playground. So that worked out really well. And another good part of this particular piece of equipment that Susie DePeister pointed out to me in Sandgate is that it's very invasive. It's very small, and there's no tubes that you drive over. So people really don't know it's there unless they see me setting it up. And so I think it would be a much more realistic measure of the actual traffic level than when we used to put out the tubes that you drive over.
Did you want to tell them how fast you, how the fastest person in Rupert in the little village there?
I believe the fastest car that I saw in, well, Mark had a.
I think it was like 75 or something.
Oh, Mark had it, yeah. 75 miles an hour.
I think it was 75. Ugh.
What was interesting is the first car that passed me, like Allison said, you can have a live view, and it's actually part of the setup program is that you should wait until you've had several cars pass you before you close up and go home, so you know it's recording. Sandgate Road is a 35-mile-per-hour road. The very first car that passed me was doing 53 miles an hour.
I have a question. We have a unit in Sunderland that we move around, and it displays the speed also, similar to Manchester. And it does record all the speeds and the number of cars. And it also has a solar panel to charge the battery. So I don't know if you've considered that.
There is an accessory.
You got it.
We could upgrade to that.
Cool.
I can answer that question really quickly. That's called a radar feedback sign, and those are a little bit different because people actually slow down when they see them, whereas what we're trying to do is just collect information. So I think that would bias the information we're collecting, but those radar feedback signs are very effective at slowing people down.
But the battery, but a solar panel might keep the battery going for longer if you'd like.
Yep,
Yes,
that's true.
that
That's a
is
good
the
point.
add-on. It's an add-on feature. I think it's I think with that package you get the solar power, and you also can actually access it remotely. So like we could just put it up on the pole, go back to our office or our house and actually access it from there. So it was a pretty neat upgrade, but it added a considerable cost to the unit, which was already pretty pricey to begin with. But maybe next time, Jim Sullivan, maybe we can get you on board with that solar panel.
Yeah. Hey, I'm a sucker for a solar panel, you know that.
Well, I saw one question from Bruce. Bruce asked, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jim.
Nope.
Bruce, where bikes and pedestrians. It does not count bikes or pedestrians. Sorry.
Too bad. Still got to do that manually, I guess. Well, thank you very much for that. It really is. It's good service that we can provide for communities. So let us know, or let your towns know that it's available. I have just a couple other real quick things. I know we're a little past our time, but we're really fortunate to have the person I am sure is the busiest person in Bennington County. Megan Harrington is our public health commissioner, working with the health department, which is it's kind of a busy time right now for the health department, as you might know. But Megan wanted to give us a quick update on the Everybody Eats program. So Megan, what can you tell us?
Hi, Jim. Thank you. Yes, and things have been a little busy, but if you want things done, you ask the busy person. So in addition to all those other things, I also co-chair the Hunger Council of Bennington County, and that is a group that's through the Hunger Free Vermont Coalition. There was a funding opportunity made available earlier this fall called Everyone Eats, and this was $5 million of CARES funding that was made available statewide. So they really focused in on allocating funding to each community across the state. And so we put in an application for Bennington to serve the whole county. And we actually called it Everyone Eats, the Shires. And every community is launching the program a little bit different. So the whole point of the program is for restaurant stimulation and also to provide meals to Vermonters negatively affected by COVID. So a lot of communities are launching just a kind of a community meal format. So restaurants produce individual meals and residents come pick up those meals and take them home. We wanted to try something a little bit different in our community. And so we set up a paper voucher model where certain distribution sites over the county, GBIX, His Pantry, Manchester Food Cupboard, Paulette Food Pantry, would receive these paper vouchers, and the vouchers were good for one meal at participating restaurants. So we were actually able to recruit 8 restaurants across the county to participate. We launched the first week of November, and the vouchers have been flying from the distribution sites. And we've seen a really positive feedback from both the restaurants and from the voucher recipients. The program was extended through the end of December. So we actually received $40,000 to launch the program. So that's about 4,000 meals. And we've only had about 300 redeemed so far. So while we've distributed a ton of vouchers and restaurants are having really positive feedback, the redemption level isn't as high as we would like to see, but we're going to take the small wins for this one, and that we got 8 restaurants on board. We've got a coalition of distribution sites distributing them, and it's really interesting to watch folks use these out in the community and what that's looking like. So it's a different model. We're going to see how it goes for the remainder of the month, and we might try some different strategies in December to draw down on those funds, maybe trying that community meals model and things like that. So we're really excited about the program, and it's all very much a pilot at this point. But if anyone would like more information, feel free to reach out to me.
Fantastic. That's really a great program, Megan. Thank you for the creativity that went into coming up with that idea and the work that it's taken to get it out there. I wanted to just mention quickly that the BCRC's annual report and various supporting documents have been sent out to all of the towns and villages. You may be contacted by a select board or a town administrator or manager regarding status commissioner versus co-commissioner status. Just to give you a heads up on that. Not a big deal, but be alert that that's out there in your communities. And in probably the most underwhelming announcement, given the state of the state and the country and the world right now, the BCRC offices are going to be, our physical offices are going to be moving next month from one side of South Street to the other side of South Street. Our new office is going to be in an office suite on the first floor of 210 South Street. Which is on the corner of Union Street and South Street. And it's actually a very nice office space, a little smaller than what we have now. The interesting thing about it, of course, is probably no one will be there for the next 6 or 8 months. So like I said, it's rather underwhelming. But I think it's important that everybody knows where we will be, and I will be there periodically until until we all get vaccinated and get back to work as semi-normal, but we are moving next month. So I'm thinking that our telephone numbers and certainly our email addresses will stay the same. So we should be okay. And with that, I don't have anything else unless anybody else does. Oh, I see our chair shaking her head. So I guess that we are good to say thank you to everybody, and we will be in touch soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.